You sit in the last pew of the cathedral, and even here, in the house of God, men still lower their eyes when you pass. That is what it means to be Don Salvatore Moretti. The candles burn in long gold rows down the aisle, hundreds of them, throwing trembling light across marble pillars older than your family's name. The air smells of wax and lilies and something colder underneath. Fear, maybe, or grief, though no one in this room would dare call it that in front of you. 600 guests fill these pews. Bankers who owe you favors. Priests who owe you silence. Men who would empty a magazine into another man's chest without blinking, and yet, tonight, they will not look at you. They know what this wedding is costing you. They know, because everyone in Italy knows, that the woman walking down that aisle in white was supposed to be wearing your ring, not his. She reaches the altar. Her veil catches the candlelight like a held breath. And you do nothing. Your hands are flat against your knees, knuckles white, the only sign that the calm on your face is a performance decades in the making. Somewhere behind you, your capos are waiting for a signal, a word, a nod, anything, that would turn this cathedral into a slaughterhouse. You gave them none. You told them to stand down. You told no one why. Not your enemies, who came expecting a war. Not your allies, who came expecting a coronation. Not even the bride, who has not looked at you once since the music began. Because the truth is, Salvatore Moretti, the man 3 governments have tried and failed to bury, is not here to stop a wedding. He is here to watch one unravel. The priest opens his book. His voice rises, steady and unaware, filling the vast silence of the nave. Do you, Isabella, take this man? And you lean forward, just slightly, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the groom's hand as it closes around hers. What none of them knew was that this wasn't a wedding. It was an execution. And no one had told the bride she was the target. 26 years earlier, he was not Don Moretti. He was just Salvatore, 9 years old, hiding under a kitchen table in Palermo while men in black coats emptied their guns into his father. He remembers the sound most. Not the screaming, the silence after. The way his mother's hand went slack around his wrist. The way no one in that house, not one of his father's trusted men, lifted a finger to stop it. That night taught him the only lesson that ever mattered. Loyalty is a currency, and most men spend it the moment it costs them something. He buried his father without a single ally standing beside him. He buried his mother 2 years later, from grief the doctors never had a name for. By 16, he had nothing left but a surname men still spat when they said it, and a promise he made to no one but himself, kneeling in the dirt of his father's grave. Whoever I love, I will never let them be taken from me again. He built his empire on that promise. Brick by brick, body by body, until the boy who hid under a table became the man other men hid from. He surrounded himself with soldiers bound not by money, but by blood oaths, men who understood that betrayal in his world did not end in exile. It ended in silence, permanent, absolute. By 30, Salvatore Moretti controlled more of northern Italy than 3 governments combined, and he trusted exactly 4 people alive. Then, on a rain-soaked evening in Florence, at a gallery opening he only attended to launder a shipment through an art dealer's books, he saw her. Isabella Conti stood in front of a painting of a burning house, unbothered by the storm outside, dressed like she'd wandered in from another world entirely. She didn't know who he was. She argued with him about the painting's symbolism for 20 minutes before an aide finally, nervously, told her his name. She didn't flinch. For the first time since he was 9 years old, Salvatore Moretti felt something other than control. He felt afraid, not of losing power, not of enemies or betrayal. He felt afraid of losing her. He should have known that fear was the one thing, in his entire empire, he never learned how to protect against. Isabella never asked him about the business. Not once, in 2 years, did she ask how many men answered to him, or what happened to the ones who didn't. She asked about the scar on his knuckles, and he told her the truth. A warehouse fire, 2009, a man he pulled out too late. She asked why he never ate breakfast, and he told her that, too. Old habits from a childhood that taught him mornings were when men came to collect debts. She was the only person alive he never had to perform for. Everyone else in his life saw the dawn. Isabella saw Salvatore, the boy underneath the empire, the one who still checked twice that the doors were locked, who still flinched at raised voices he didn't control. He proposed to her on the terrace of his villa overlooking Lake Como, no audience, no spectacle, just the two of them and a ring that once belonged to his mother. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure nothing ever touches you," he told her. "Nothing. No one." She said yes with tears in her eyes, and for a while, Salvatore Moretti believed he had finally outrun the promise he made at his father's grave. But there was one evening, months before the wedding, that he chose not to think about. He walked into his study to find Isabella deep in conversation with Antonio, his consigliere, his oldest friend, the one man who had earned unconditional trust over 15 years of loyalty. They stopped talking the moment they saw him. Isabella smiled too quickly. Antonio's jaw was tight in a way Salvatore had only ever seen before violence. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Fine," Isabella said. "Just wedding planning." He let it go. He trusted her. He trusted Antonio more than he trusted himself. It would be the last mistake he ever made as a man who believed loyalty could not be bought, only earned. 3 weeks before the wedding, Isabella Conti vanished. The call came at 2 a.m. Her apartment was empty. Her phone dead. Her car still in the garage. Salvatore did something he had not done in 15 years. He panicked. He tore Florence apart street by street, called in favors from men he'd sworn never to speak to again, put a price on information so high that half the underworld of northern Italy stopped whatever they were doing to look for one woman. 72 hours. 3 days of silence that felt like the longest years of his life. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He sat in his study with Antonio at his side, the two of them running through every enemy who might have taken her, every rival who would dare touch the one thing in the world Salvatore Moretti had ever begged God to protect. Antonio never left his side. Antonio held his hand steady when it shook. Antonio told him they would find her, that he had people watching every border, every airport, every safe house in the region. On the third night, Isabella walked back into her apartment on her own 2 feet, unharmed, composed, and utterly unwilling to explain where she had been. Salvatore didn't care. He held her so tightly, he thought his ribs would crack, whispered apologies for failures he couldn't even name, promised her whatever she needed, whoever she needed removed from this earth to feel safe again. She only looked at him and said, "I'm sorry, Salvatore. I can't marry you." 4 days later, the invitations went out. Isabella Conti was engaged, not to a stranger, not to a rival, but to Antonio, the same man who had sat beside Salvatore for 3 sleepless nights, holding his hand steady, promising him they would find her together. Salvatore never got an explanation. Not from Isabella. Not from the only friend he had left alive. He asked once. Just once. Antonio looked him dead in the eye and said, "Some things you don't deserve to know yet." Yet. That single word would haunt Salvatore Moretti for the next 3 weeks. Through the engagement party he wasn't invited to, through the wedding planning he heard about secondhand, through every sleepless night he spent trying to understand how the two people he trusted most in this world had built a wedding on the ashes of his. He never raised a hand against either of them. His men couldn't understand it. His enemies mocked him for it. But Salvatore Moretti had learned one thing in 26 years of surviving this world. When the truth is buried this deep, violence only buries it further. So he waited. He would stand in the back of that cathedral on their wedding day, silent, patient, and broken in a way no bullet had ever managed to break him. Because some betrayals you don't answer with a gun. You answer by finding out exactly how deep the knife went and who put it there. His men expected blood. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Salvatore's inner circle waited for the order that never came. They had seen him unmake lesser betrayals, a stolen shipment, a broken oath, a whispered word to the wrong person, with a ruthlessness that had become legend across 3 countries. A wedding stealing his fiancée and his most trusted friend in one blow should have ended in fire. Instead, he gave one order: watch and say nothing. Because somewhere beneath the rage, a colder part of Salvatore's mind, the part that had kept him alive since he was 9 years old under that kitchen table, refused to accept the simplest explanation. Isabella did not fall in love with Antonio in 3 days. People do not rebuild their entire lives in 72 hours out of nowhere. Something had forced this. Someone had engineered it. And if he stormed that cathedral, if he put a gun to Antonio's head and demanded the truth in front of 600 witnesses, he would get exactly what men like Antonio were trained to give under pressure: a lie, polished and immediate, designed to end the conversation, not answer it. Salvatore had built an empire on a single principle: real power is never proven by what you destroy. It is proven by what you can afford to let happen in front of you without flinching. So he sat in the back pew of that cathedral, not as a broken man losing the woman he loved, but as a hunter who understood that some prey only reveals itself when it believes it is no longer being hunted. Antonio had spent 15 years earning Salvatore's trust. Whatever secret he was protecting, he would not surrender it to threats. But secrets have a weight of their own, and weddings, Salvatore knew, had a way of cracking men open in front of God and witnesses, in ways interrogation rooms never could. He didn't come to that cathedral to stop a wedding. He came to watch a lie collapse under the weight of its own ceremony. All he had to do was wait. The priest's voice fills the cathedral, steady and unaware of the war being fought in silence around him. Do you, Antonio, take Isabella to be your lawfully wedded wife? Antonio's face gives away nothing. 15 years of standing beside Salvatore Moretti taught him that. His voice is calm, measured, betraying not a flicker of the secret Salvatore is certain he's carrying. I do. Salvatore's hands tighten against his knees. His jaw is a locked door. Somewhere behind him, he can feel his men holding their breath, waiting for the signal that isn't coming. The priest turns to Isabella. And do you, Isabella, take Antonio to be your lawfully wedded husband? She hesitates. It's brief, half a second no more, but Salvatore sees it. Her bouquet trembles in her hands, white knuckles around white roses. Her eyes flick, just once, toward the back of the cathedral, toward him, before snapping forward again like she's forbidden herself from doing it. The word catches in her throat. The cathedral holds 600 people, and not one of them breathes. Then Antonio leans in. It looks, to everyone watching, like a tender gesture, a groom whispering something soft and private to his bride in the seconds before she says yes forever. A few guests even smile at it, mistaking it for love. Salvatore does not smile. He watches Antonio's lips move, watches the words leave his mouth too quiet for anyone else in that cathedral to hear. 6 words. Whatever they are, they hit Isabella like a physical blow. Her bouquet slips from her fingers and hits the marble floor. The words are quiet. 6 syllables, maybe less. Spoken so softly that not even the priest, standing 3 feet away, catches them. But Salvatore doesn't need to hear them. He watches them land. He watches the exact moment Isabella Connie stops being a bride and becomes something else entirely, a woman standing at the edge of a truth she has spent years trying to outrun. Tell him whose daughter you are. That's all Antonio says. 6 words, and the bouquet falls from her hands. 6 words, and 20 white roses scatter across cold marble, the sound of them hitting the floor the only noise in a cathedral holding its breath. Isabella doesn't look at Antonio. She doesn't look at the priest, still waiting, book open, for an answer to a question no one in that building cares about anymore. She turns, slowly, deliberately, like a woman walking towards something she has spent her whole life avoiding, and finds Salvatore's eyes across 600 guests and 40 feet of stone and candlelight. For the first time since he was 9 years old, hiding beneath a kitchen table while his father's blood spread across the floor, Salvatore Moretti feels the ground disappear beneath him. He doesn't know what the words meant. Not yet. But he knows, with the same instinct that has kept him alive for 3 decades in a world built on knives and silence, that whatever Isabella is about to say will not just end a wedding. It will end everything he believes about who he is. The cathedral around them has gone still in the particular way rooms go still right before violence, 600 people sensing without understanding that they are witnessing something they were never supposed to see. Isabella's lips part. Her voice, when it comes, is barely a whisper, but in that silence, it carries to every corner of the cathedral like a scream. My name isn't Isabella Conti. My name is Isabella Bellandi. The name lands on Salvatore like a physical blow because he knows it. Everyone in that room old enough to remember the 90s knows it. The Bellandi family, one of the last rival clans to challenge Moretti control over northern Italy, wiped out in a single night 23 years ago. 11 people, a mother, a father, 2 brothers, cousins, an infant niece. Officially, the history books of the underworld called it a war casualty, a tragedy of the trade. Salvatore had always been told his father mourned that night, that the Bellandi massacre was the work of a rival faction, a bloody chapter that had nothing to do with the Morettis. He had believed that lie for 23 years. Your father didn't just order it, Isabella says, her voice shaking but never breaking. He was in the house. I was 6 years old. I hid in a closet while he watched his men finish what they started. I only survived because a woman on his peril couldn't go through with killing a child. She smuggled me out, gave me a new name, a new family, a new life 300 kilometers from everything I'd ever known. Salvatore's world does not shatter loudly. It shatters in silence, the way the worst truths always do. I found out who I really was 4 years ago, she continues. The same year I met you at that gallery. I didn't fall in love with you by accident, Salvatore. I fell in love with you despite knowing exactly whose son you were. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself you weren't your father. Her eyes moved to Antonio. I told the one person I trusted with the truth. And he told me something I didn't know. Antonio finally speaks, his calm finally cracking. My father was in that house too, Salvatore. He was the one who pulled the trigger on her mother. Your father gave the order. Mine carried it out. 2 families, bound by the same blood on their hands, and yours built an empire on top of it while covering every trace. The study. The whispered conversation Salvatore walked in on months ago. Not wedding planning. A reckoning being built in real time, brick by brick, behind his back. I couldn't marry you carrying that name, Isabella says, tears finally breaking free. Not without you knowing the truth first. Antonio offered to help me disappear from your world the only way that would actually work, by taking your trust and your empire's attention away from me long enough to expose what your father did. This wedding was never real, Salvatore. She looks at him, broken and resolute all at once. It was the only way either of us could finally breathe. The cathedral breaks apart in pieces, like ice cracking under weight no one can see. A woman near the front row is the first to stand, murmuring to her husband. Then another. Within seconds, the polite silence of 600 guests curdles into whispers, then open murmuring, then the unmistakable scrape of chairs and heels against marble as people who came expecting a wedding realize they are witnessing the unraveling of an empire instead. Salvatore's men shift along the walls, hands drifting toward jackets, eyes locked on him, waiting for the order that would turn this cathedral into a massacre to rival the one 23 years ago. It would be easy. It would be expected. 2 words from him and Antonio would be dead before he reached the cathedral doors, Isabella's new name buried along with every witness who ever heard it spoken. For a long moment, Salvatore says nothing, and the silence is worse than any gunshot. He thinks of his father, the man he mourned, the man he built a legacy on, the man who walked into a house and erased a family while calling it business. He thinks of every story he was told about that night, every lie dressed up as history. He thinks of Isabella, 6 years old, hiding in a closet while his blood did that to hers. The old Salvatore, the boy who swore at his father's grave that no one would ever take from him again, wants to burn this cathedral to the ground and call it justice. But justice for what? For a truth he never chose to inherit? For a woman who loved him anyway, even carrying the weight of what his family did? Antonio stands his ground, unflinching, waiting for the verdict he is to know might cost him his life. Isabella doesn't move either, roses scattered at her feet, watching the man she once promised herself to make a choice no ceremony could script for him. Salvatore rises from the pew. 600 people flinch as one. He walks the length of the aisle, slow, deliberate, past faces frozen in fear and disbelief, until he stands before the two people who just detonated everything he believed about his own bloodline. He looks at Antonio first, then at Isabella. "You're right," he says quietly so only they can hear. "I'm not my father." And for the first time in 23 years, the Moretti name is used not to end a life in that cathedral, but to let three of them survive the truth. There is no annulment ceremony, no press conference, no clean resolution the guests can carry home and repeat as gossip. There is only the aftermath. Three people standing amid scattered roses and abandoned pews, an empire's worth of secrets now spoken aloud in front of 600 witnesses who will never be able to unhear them. Salvatore doesn't take Isabella's hand. He doesn't ask her to leave with him. Whatever they were to each other died somewhere between the altar and the truth, buried under the weight of a massacre neither of them chose to be born into. He doesn't kill Antonio either. There is no order given, no blood spilled on holy ground. Instead, Salvatore does something none of his men have ever seen him do. He walks away. Out the cathedral doors, past the cars waiting to take him back to a life that no longer makes sense, into a Florence evening that looks exactly the same as it did that morning, before he knew what his name truly cost. His empire will survive the night. Empires always do. But something else will not. The story he told himself about who he was, the legacy he thought he inherited clean. Isabella remains at the altar, no longer a bride, no longer hiding behind a name that was never truly hers. Antonio stands beside her, the wedding meaningless now, the mission it was built to complete finally, brutally, achieved. 3 lives, 1 truth. An empire built on a lie that took 23 years and 1 wedding to finally collapse. Salvatore Moretti walks into the night alone, carrying the one thing violence never could have given him, the truth about exactly who he really is. If you were in his place, would you have let her go? Or would you have burned the whole church down to keep her? Tell me in the comments.